Tuesday, March 31st, 2023, 10:30 in the morning. Pukgu District, Daegu City, South Korea. The spring sunlight was falling on the Shincheon stream that cuts through the city center. A local resident was out for a morning walk near the Jamsu Bridge. It was an ordinary start to the day. Then they noticed something floating in the water. At first, they thought it was trash, but when they got closer, they could see it was a travel suitcase. The Shincheon is a shallow stream, and the suitcase was caught on some rocks underneath, about 100 meters downstream from where it had been thrown in. The resident felt something was off. It didn't make sense for a perfectly good suitcase to be floating in the stream, so they called the police. 2 patrol cars and 2 investigator vehicles arrived on the scene. Officers waded into the water and pulled the suitcase out. Then they opened the zipper, and everyone at the scene froze. Inside the suitcase was a body of a woman. This is the Daegu suitcase murder. The detectives moved immediately. Their first priority was identification. They didn't have a starting point without knowing who this woman was. Fingerprints were taken from the body along with a DNA sample, and the fingerprint results came back. The victim was 54 years old at the time of death and a resident of Daegu's Seoggu district, and we will call her A. Once she was identified, investigators began tracing her last known moments. When was she last seen? Who was she with? Where was she living? It turned out A had been living separately from her husband. Instead, she had been staying with her daughter, a 26-year-old woman named Choi Sun-jung, and Sun-jung's husband, a 26-year-old man called Cho Jae-bok. Detectives located the couple's residence, a studio apartment in Chunggu District, Daegu, just a single room. The police pulled CCTV footage from the surrounding area and started going through it. One clip stopped them cold. March 18th, 11:27 a.m. There were 2 people in the footage, a young man and a young woman, both in matching hooded jackets, almost like they had deliberately coordinated their outfits. The man was walking ahead, pulling a suitcase with his right hand. His left hand was tucked in his pocket. The woman followed behind, both hands in her pockets, head down, eyes on the ground. No words were exchanged. The clip was only 8 seconds long, but the investigators were certain there is a body in that suitcase. The 2 people in the footage were Sun-jung, the victim's daughter, and Jae-bok, the victim's son-in-law. The police brought them in. At first, they both denied everything. Then investigators showed them the footage, and that was the end of the argument. The 2 were right there, on camera. They eventually confessed, but what they said made no sense at all. My mother passed away on March 18th, so we put her in the suitcase and dumped her in the stream, Sun-jung said. The detective asked, "How did your mother die?" Sun-jung answered, "My husband hit her." And they turned to Jae-bok. "Why did you hit your mother-in-law?" And Jae-bok's answer was, "She was being too loud." The detective wasn't sure he heard that right. Too loud? Is that a reason to kill someone? Jae-bok continued. "She was always noisy around the house, loud when she did the dishes. She didn't put things away, so I hit her." The room went quiet. Dishes being too loud, not putting things away. That was the reason this man killed his mother-in-law. The motive made no sense, but equally as disturbing was how Jae-bok said it. Calm, flat, no emotion, like he was describing something completely unremarkable. The investigators pressed further, and what emerged was deeply troubling. Beating her was not a one-time incident. Jae-bok had been assaulting A repeatedly since February 2026. There had been nearly 2 months of ongoing physical abuse. A's body was sent to the National Forensic Service for an autopsy. On April 1st, they had their preliminary autopsy results. The autopsy revealed that A had multiple broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, a fractured skull. The cause of death was multiple blunt force injuries. She had been beaten to death. Police had an early estimate for how long this assault had lasted. 1, maybe 2 hours. That estimate, it would turn out, was nowhere close. To understand how we ended up here, we should go back to September 2025. That's when Sunjung and Jae-bok got married. Almost immediately after the wedding, Jae-bok began beating his wife. It started early, and it didn't stop. Sunjung was being abused by her husband from almost the very beginning of their marriage, and she told no one. When A found out what was happening to her daughter, she made a decision. She would move in with them. A had been living in Daegu's Seoggu district, separately from her husband. She left that place and walked knowingly into a household where there was violence. Not because she was asked, not because she needed a place to stay. She did it because she refused to leave her daughter there alone. Initially, Sunjung and Jae-bok were living in the city of Gyeongsan, but in February 2026, the couple relocated to a studio apartment in Daegu. A made them move with them. That studio apartment is where things fell apart completely. It was a single-room unit, a place designed for just one person. Barely 300 square feet, enough room for a bed, a desk, a small bathroom, and little else. 3 people living in a space barely big enough for one. It was a pressure cooker. From the moment they moved in, Jae-bok's behavior shifted. He began directing his violence at A, as well as his wife. His stated reason for the first assault was that she unpacked the moving boxes too slowly. After that, the excuses were basically interchangeable. She was too loud when she did the dishes, she didn't put things back in their place, she made too much noise when she was moving around the apartment. The violence became routine. And Sunjung watched it happen. She had been the victim of her husband's violence since their wedding. She knew what he was capable of. She was terrified of him. And so she said nothing, did nothing, and told no one because she believed that reporting him would only make things worse. According to police, Jae-bok actively reinforced that fear. He told both women not to contact the outside world, not to answer calls from anyone, and not to reach out to police under any circumstances. He controlled their access to help. And it worked. Inside that apartment, no one called for help, not once in 2 months. There were no domestic violence reports, no hospital visits, no neighbor complaints. A was being beaten for weeks, sustaining injuries that would ordinarily send a person to the emergency room. But she never went. She likely couldn't. Then came the night of March 17th, 2026. Whatever his reason that evening, Jae-bok began hitting and kicking A. But this time, he didn't stop when he usually would have. He kept going and going and going. The assault lasted approximately 12 hours, from late on the night of March 17th until the morning of March 18th. During those 12 hours, Jae-bok took breaks. He rested for a while. At certain points, he and Sunjung smoked cigarettes together in the same room where A lay injured on the floor. Then he got up and started again. At intervals, he slapped A's face, not in a continued frenzy, but deliberately, apparently to check whether she was still unconscious. A begged him to stop. She told him she was in pain, but he continued. And Sunjung was present during the whole thing. She did not intervene. She didn't call anyone. She later told investigators she was too afraid of her husband to do anything. Police noted that Sunjung was not physically restrained or locked in. She could, in a technical sense, have walked out or called someone. But she didn't, whether that was the paralysis of someone who has been conditioned by long-term abuse or something else is a question the courts will have to consider. By the time it was over, A had sustained fractures to multiple ribs, her pelvis, and the back of her skull. At around 10 a.m. on March 18th, A succumbed to her injuries. She died on the floor of that studio apartment in front of her daughter, having been beaten for an entire night by her son-in-law. She had come to that apartment to protect her child. She died there instead. March 18th, shortly after 10 a.m., A's body was on the floor. Any reasonable response would have been to call the emergency services. Even knowing what had been done, if a person is dead, you call. But they didn't. Sunjung later said she did whatever Chaebok told her to do. Chaebok appears to have driven every decision from that point forward. He looked around the apartment, there was a suitcase in the corner, and he brought it over. The suitcase was small, approximately 50 centimeters tall, 40 centimeters wide, and 30 centimeters deep. Not much larger than a suitcase you could take as a carry-on. Chaebok forced A's body inside it. A had a slight build, which is the only reason it was even physically possible. Even so, her body had to be compressed and bent to fit. The zipper was closed over her. Then they got ready to go outside. It was raining. They both put on hooded jackets, matching ones. Sunjung put on a pair of slides. Chaebok picked up the suitcase. They opened the door and walked out in broad daylight, transporting a dead body. 11:27 a.m., the CCTV clip, just 8 seconds of footage. Chaebok in front, pulling the suitcase with his right hand, left hand in his pocket, walking through the rain without an umbrella, glancing around periodically, checking whether anyone was watching. Sunjung behind him, hands in pockets, head down, eyes fixed on the pavement. Silence between them. The body of Sunjung's mother was in that suitcase, and her daughter said nothing. She just followed her husband. They walked for roughly 20 minutes. Their destination was the Shincheon Stream, near the public parking lot by Chilseong Market. A stretch of shallow water cutting through the city, a place that people take their morning walks. They reached the area beneath the Chamsu Bridge. Chaebok pushed the suitcase into the water. It floated downstream and eventually came to rest against some rocks about 100 meters away, where it would stay for the next 13 days. They turned around and walked home. That was it. After dumping the body, Chaebok told Sunjung, "Don't talk to the police. Don't answer if anyone contacts you. Don't reach out to anyone." And she complied. According to the police, the couple then went about their daily lives as if nothing had happened at all. Almost 2 weeks passed. Investigators found no indication of panic, flight, or any attempt to leave the area during that period. They stayed in the same apartment. They followed the same routine. All while A's body lay in the cold, in the middle of the stream. The cold, however, ended up helping the investigation. The low March temperatures and coldness of the water meant that decomposition was slow. When A was finally discovered, she was found in a recognizable condition. March 31st, 2026. After A's body was discovered, the investigators wasted no time. 10.5 hours later, at 9 p.m. that same evening, Chaebok and Sunjung were arrested at their apartment. A police spokesperson later remarked that the disposal showed no real planning. The site wasn't scouted, the suitcase was left in a shallow public waterway in the middle of the day, in an area with regular foot traffic. It was almost certain to be found. That apparent absence of planning is part of what led to the case being resolved so quickly. Based on the investigation, the following charges were applied. Chaebok was charged with aggravated homicide of a lineal ascendant and abandonment of a corpse. Under Korean law, this first charge applies when someone kills a direct ancestor, a parent or grandparent, or a spouse's direct ancestor. This offense carries a minimum sentence of 7 years imprisonment and can go up to life imprisonment, or in extreme cases, the death penalty. Sunjung was charged with abandonment of a corpse. Investigators determined she did not participate in the killing itself, but that she was present when her mother's body was stuffed into the suitcase, and she walked alongside her husband as they transported it to the river. That makes her a participant in the disposal. She told investigators she acted under her husband's direction and that she was too afraid of him to refuse. On April 2nd, both appeared at Daegu District Court for their warrant review hearings, which determined whether or not they should be formally detained for the duration of the investigation. Chaebok and Sunjung were transported to the court separately to prevent the two from having any contact with each other. Chaebok left the detention facility first at 9:23 a.m. Sunjung followed 5 minutes later in a different vehicle. Both arrived at court wearing caps pulled low and masks covering their faces. neither said a word to journalists. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked Chaebok directly, "Why did you assault your mother-in-law? Aren't you sorry? Did you think she would die?" He said nothing. Sunjung was asked, "Did you help dispose of your mother's body? Aren't you sorry?" She also said nothing. The judge approved custody for both, citing the gravity of the crimes and the risk that either might flee before facing trial. After the court hearing, Chaebok continued to be questioned by the police. What he said in those sessions is difficult to process. He told investigators he repented. He also told them that he had treated both his wife and his mother-in-law well throughout their time living together, that he had taken care of Sunjung, bought her things she needed, and then he said this, "I still love her." And he was referring to his wife, the same wife who watched her mother be beaten to death over a period of 12 hours. The same wife he had been physically abusing since their wedding night. The wife he had told to stay silent, answer no calls, and contact no one, while a body lay in a suitcase in a public stream. It's not clear what to make of that, whether it reflects a genuine but deeply distorted sense of attachment, a calculated attempt to appear sympathetic, or something else entirely. That is something investigators and the courts will have to determine. What is clear is that his account of events bears no relationship to what the evidence shows. And one detail emerged after the initial investigation that is worth adding here. Chaebok had been married before. According to SBS's investigative program, Curious Story Why, which aired on April 10th, the production team tracked down his former wife. She told them she had married Chaebok in 2021 and eventually divorced him because of severe, repeated domestic violence. Her words, "The pattern is exactly the same." That rules out circumstance as an explanation, not the cramped apartment, not the stress of the move, not the pressure of 3 people in a single room. He had done this before to a different woman years earlier. The ex-wife also indicated there may be other crimes connected to Chaebok that haven't yet come to light. And the prosecution's investigation team is expected to look into this as the case moves forward. Now the case has been transferred from police to prosecutors, and that transfer marks the shift from investigation to formal prosecution. Chaebok's charges have been updated to include assault and battery and false imprisonment, and several threads remain unresolved. Police have been conducting digital forensics on Chaebok's phone to determine whether he searched online for body disposal methods immediately after A died. If he did, that would indicate the disposal was not a panicked impulse, but a deliberate decision, which could affect how the court views the overall degree of intent behind everything that happened that day. A more detailed forensic autopsy is also underway to confirm the precise cause of death and to rule out any contributing factors, including possible poisoning. Regarding Sunjung, legal experts have raised the possibility that she could have her charges upgraded. A professor of criminal law noted that even though Sunjung didn't land the blows herself, she could be tried as an accomplice to the murder, depending on how prosecutors assess her role, specifically whether she had the opportunity to intervene or seek help and chose not to. The distinction between being a victim of coercive control and being a passive participant in a homicide is something the court will have to draw carefully. A formal psychiatric evaluation of Chaebok is also expected as part of the prosecution process to assess his criminal responsibility and mental state. Under Korean law, suspects accused of serious violent crimes can have their names and photographs officially released. Chaebok's full name and photograph was revealed to the public on April 8th. Police cited the severity and cruelty of the crime. Sunjung's identity has not officially been revealed by the police. And there are more questions to be answered. There have been reports that Chaebok, and Sunjung were all registered as having intellectual disabilities, in which case they may have been 3 people trapped in a situation that none of them had the capacity to navigate. Police are conducting their own assessment. The disability registrations, which have been reported but not officially confirmed, may or may not become a significant factor at trial. What is certain is that the systems that might have prevented this did not. There was no welfare check, no medical referral, no domestic violence response, no social worker, nothing. The violence went on for approximately 2 months in a room that shared walls with other rooms, in a building in the middle of a densely populated city. People often ask, in cases like this, how no one noticed the abuse. The honest answer is usually the same, because the people inside were too afraid, too isolated, or too limited in their ability to ask for help. Because those on the outside never asked, and because the systems designed to find them never looked. A was 54 years old. She found out her daughter was being beaten by her new husband. She didn't call the police, didn't file a report, didn't try to extract Sunjung from the situation from a safe distance. Instead, she moved in. She put herself in the same home as the person hurting her child because she thought her presence might help. But instead, she ended up on the floor of their studio herself, and she died there following a beating that lasted 12 hours while she begged her attacker to stop. The suitcase Taebok used to move her body was barely larger than when you take it as a carry-on luggage, and he forced her into it anyway. And Sunjung, wearing matching clothes, walked behind him in silence to the river. And 13 days later, a stranger out for a morning walk found her. The case is now with prosecutors, and a trial will follow. Sentences will be handed down. Taebok will likely say, through his lawyers, that he repents. He will probably say he loved his family. The evidence says something else entirely. And A, who moved into that apartment trying to save her daughter, will not be there to say anything at all. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.